In Chris's mind, the figures of everyone standing at the cannon pier were floating. There was Sana, burying her face in Elandra's chest and crying. Clare also hugged Ramal and was crying. Bibi is flying around over the sea, sniffing with his nose. Martis and Rowan stood silently on the ship.
Who do you want to talk to?
The voice of Almayan echoed in Chris's head.
Can I talk? Yes, I can connect you with each person individually, but only to those you can truly trust.
Chris thought that Sana would be the best.
I want to talk to Sana,
Chris said, focusing on Sana. Then, in an instant, Sana's figure was magnified.
Well then, talk to her. But I can't keep this link going for too long, so make it brief.
The voice of Almayan gradually faded away.
Sana.
Chris's voice echoed in Sana's head, causing her shoulders to tremble. Raising her head from Elandra's chest, Sana looked around.
Chris? Shush, be quiet.
It was definitely Chris's voice. When Sana looked up at Elandra's face, she smiled back at Sana as if she understood. Sana looked around, but it seemed that no one else had noticed.
Sana, please listen calmly.
Chris's voice echoed again.
Be careful not to let others notice, especially Rowan.
Wiping her tears, Sana nodded as she buried her face again in Elandra's chest.
I'm alive, so don't worry about me. Right now, I'm in an underwater cave directly beneath Reguia. I was helped by a mermaid named Almayan. I'm sorry for making you worry.
Warm tears streamed down Sana's cheeks as she heard those words.
But it seems like it's better if not many people know that I'm alive yet. I can't talk about the details right now because there's no time.
Still buried in her face, Sana quietly replied, Okay.
I'm going to look for Aqua from now on. It seems that Aqua is not in Atlias. Almayan said that it's located in an underwater city called Lamureria, off the coast of Hawaii. She will take me there. It will be okay, so don't worry.
Sana replied, I understand, be careful.
I want you to let Bibi know that I'm safe. Also, please tell Clare, Elandra, and Ramal. After that, I want you to wait somewhere away from Rowan for a while. He might not be trustworthy, after all.
Sana looked up and glanced sideways at Rowan. Rowan was sitting on the railing of the deck, still looking down. He shouldn't have noticed the conversation with Chris. Sana replied again, I understand.
Anyway, I'm safe, so don't worry.
Hearing that word, Chris's voice suddenly cut off. Even when Sana called out, Chris, there was no response. Sana was once again overcome with anxiety, but she reassured herself that it would be okay. Above all, Chris is alive. Thinking that, a smile naturally spread across her face. Chris had regained consciousness in the cave. Almayan was breathing heavily. After moving Chris's hand away from her forehead, she took a deep breath and asked, Is it okay? Chris nodded vigorously.
Yeah, thank you. Now, let's go,
said Almayan as she headed towards the spring. Well, by the way, how are we getting there? Chris had assumed that a spaceship like Adamastor would come to pick up. Chris hesitated and called out to Almayan.
This spring has a tunnel called Port Arvin that connects each underwater city. If you go through it, you'll reach Lamureria in no time.
Almayan smiled and jumped into the spring from the shore. When she jumped up, Almayan had transformed back into a mermaid. She just quietly jumped in, yet she has already reached the center of the spring. From there, she turned back and waved her hand. Chris crouched down and cautiously dipped his toes into the spring. However, strangely, he didn't feel like he was in the water. He didn't feel any coldness either. Chris took a leap of faith and jumped straight into the spring. It feels light, as if floating in mid-air. There is no resistance from the water, and he can move his arms and legs freely. Chris took a deep breath and dove underwater. Even without wearing the Oramarus, his vision was bright and clear. He could see far away, almost as if he were on the ground. Using the technique of breaststroke, he kicked and pulled with both hands. Then, with just one stroke, he found himself instantly reaching Almayan as if flying through the sky.
You can breathe underwater too.
As Chris lifted his face out of the water and took a deep breath, Almayan said.
So you don't have to hold your breath. Now, come with me.
Almayan turned back and smiled as Chris dove underwater.
Is it really possible to breathe underwater?
Chris, still half in doubt, dove down once more. Indeed, there is a sensation that he might be able to breathe. When Chris directed his gaze, Almayan nodded back. Chris took a deep breath and gently inhaled through his nose. There was no sensation of water seeping in. Chris was able to breathe just like on the ground, without any problems. Seeing Chris with a look of surprise, Almayan smiled again. Then, turning around and facing forward, she started swimming towards the depths of the spring. Chris followed after that. Chris could glide through the water effortlessly, feeling as if he had become a dolphin. In no time at all, they reached the back, and Almayan turned around in front of a large protruding rock. There is a small round hole under the rock that is just big enough for a person to pass through.
This is the portarvan that leads to Lamureria.
Then she signaled with her eyes, and Almayan went into the hole first. Chris silently followed behind. The cave was dim and eerie. There was an atmosphere that suggested unknown deep-sea creatures might be lurking. And Chris tried to make himself as small as possible to avoid touching anything while following Almayan.
We're almost there,
Almayan said without looking back. It was in the blink of an eye. As they emerged from the cave, blue rays of light were pouring down from above. The sight of the Almayan swimming towards that light was almost like a scene created by CGI. It was so fantastical. The place Chris arrived at, led by Almayan, was a blue glowing crystal cave, similar in structure to the underwater cave of Reguia from earlier. On the shore, there stood a man with long blonde hair. The well-built man, draped in a yellow cloak, stood firmly with his arms crossed, intently gazing at Chris. As Chris instinctively braced himself, Almayan said reassuringly, "It's okay." Then, she swam towards the man. When Almayan got to the shore, she had somehow shape-shifted into a human form. Chris also climbed up onto the shore.
Chris, this is Prince Glenn of Lamureria.
Almayan quickly introduced the man to Chris, who had just come ashore.
And Glenn, this is Chris, whom I was talking about.
As Almayan introduced Chris, and Glenn extended his hand saying, "Nice to meet you."
Nice to meet you too, I'm Chris.
Chris shook the large hand that was extended to him, feeling a bit confused.
Actually, we have almost pinpointed Aqua's location. Glenn will guide you there. Glenn and I share the same beliefs. We believe it is our mission to deliver the crystal element to the right people for the Earth's ascension.
Seeing Chris struggling to grasp the sudden situation, Almayan explained. Chris bowed his head to Glenn.
Thank you for coming here. Normally, I would like to hold a party to welcome you. But given the current situation, I apologize for having to greet you in a place like this.
Glenn bowed his head and apologized.
Aqua is believed to be sleeping deep underground in the center of Lamureria, known as Oceanus. Many soldiers have already come to this Lamureria from various cities heading there. We are currently in a situation where we are waiting for Aqua to awaken. However, I believe that the time has already come,
Glenn said, looking into Chris's eyes.
Aqua is waiting for the true, chosen one, to appear.
After staring into Chris's eyes for a while, Glenn turned his gaze towards the cave that continued behind him.
Well then, I will guide you to Oceanus. Please follow me.
Nodding as if signaling, Glenn turned around and walked away. Facing Chris, who was standing still. Almayan also nodded and said, "Don't worry. Indeed, having come this far, there is no turning back." Chris honestly didn't know if he could trust the two of them. However, he had no choice but to move forward as he was guided. That was the best thing he could do. And now, being here in this place, Chris felt a sense of conviction that he was on the right path. Nodding back to Almayan, Chris renewed his determination and followed Glenn. To avoid being noticed by Rowan, Sana conveyed Chris's story to Elandra. After finishing the story, Elandra headed towards Martis and Rowan, and she told them that Chris probably is no longer alive. As a guardian dragon, Elandra conveyed that she can understand the life and death of the being she protects. The two who know the underwater world well accepted Elandra's story without any doubt. If a human who is not an underwater dweller falls into this seabed, their internal organs will be destroyed in an instant. Moreover, there are numerous monsters in this sea area. It was clear that there was no hope of rescue. In response to Elandra's suggestion to return to the underground city to report this matter and discuss future plans, both of them readily agreed as if there were no other options. Rowan explained that he didn't know the ship he arranged had been taken over by pirates, but he repeatedly apologized as if it were his fault. While Elandra was talking to Martis and Rowan on the deck of the ship, Sana called out to Bibi, who was flying around in the dark sea searching for Chris.
"Bibi, listen carefully,"
Sana said as caught flying Bibi, directing her thoughts solely to him so that no one else could hear.
"Chris is alive."
"Really?" Upon hearing this, Bibi wagged his tail excitedly and licked Sana's face. Then, Bibi crawled out from Sana's arms and flew around her in circles. When Bibi came in front of her and asked, "Where's him?" Sana caught Bibi and said, "Please stay still," as she hugged her tightly. Then, she looked back at the ship. Martis and Rowan, who were talking on the deck, didn't seem to care about Sana and Bibi at all.
"It's bad if Rowan finds out that Chris is alive right now. I'll explain the reason later. So, let's just pretend that we don't know Chris is alive."
"But he is alive, right?" Bibi asked, mouth open and little tongue hanging out, eyes sparkling.
"Yeah, I'm sure that he's alive. Earlier, Chris contacted me saying, 'No worries because I'm alive.' And then he told me to let Bibi know that fact too. Chris went far away to search for Aqua, but we'll see him again soon, so you don't have to worry anymore."
After finishing listening to Sana's story, Bibi wagged his tail vigorously again.
"Please, if Rowan sees you happy, he might get the hint, so please be quiet."
Saying this, Sana pressed down on Bibi's rear and pretended to comfort him by burying her face in his ear. After finishing the conversation with Martis and Rowan, Elandra called everyone on board the ship. Then, she explained the situation to everyone. Clare, who didn't know the circumstances, looked down and cried on Ramal's shoulder. Sana also hugged Bibi and pretended to cry. Then the group boarded the ship and returned to Ascension. During their return, the fireworks event ended, and the sky regained a brightness akin to midday. After parting ways with Rowan and returning to Adamascus, Elandra explained to Martis, Clare, and Ramal what she had heard from Sana. Just from Chris's story, Elandra can't understand Rowan's intentions, nor can she determine whether Rowan was actually plotting to take Aqua. It was unclear to what extent Martis, who was in contact with Rowan, was complicit with him. However, without Martis's help, she cannot head towards Lamureria. For that reason, Elandra decided to take a gamble. She paid close attention to Martis's feelings, but it seemed that he was completely unaware of the situation. Martis immediately contacted the central office of the Tios and reported the entire situation to Salite. From Salite, there was an instruction to let Rowan swim for the time being. It was said that several observers would be dispatched from the central office. And then, Martis was instructed to immediately head to Lamureria to support Chris.
Why didn't you tell me?
Clare accused Elandra as they headed towards the center of Lamureria, Oceanus. Elandra smiled back at Clare and replied,
Well, if I told you, you wouldn't be able to keep quiet and would end up questioning Rowan, right?
Beside them, Sana nodded in agreement. Seeing the two of them, Clare turned away with a huff. However, unable to contain her joy at Chris being alive, a smile broke out on Clare's face.